This episode is brought to you by New Moon Wishing, a self-care guidebook for wishful thinkers. Please see the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I am your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here.
So nice to have you one more time. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about a major aspect that's unfolding, Jupiter square Saturn.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
It is.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like generational, like when Jupiter and Uranus or something like that are in aspect, but it's not super common. So it's definitely an interesting one to follow.
Yeah, and it's unfolding towards the end of 2024 into next year, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So
we'll have a bit of a dig into Jupiter square Saturn.
Yeah. We're going to look at what it looks like in the natal chart.
Right.
And a bit of a description of maybe what it is like as a transit.
Yeah.
And of course, some celebrity examples are always interesting.
All right.
A little history.
So should we sort of start off with, well, in general, what does Jupiter represent to start with?
Yeah, I mean, Jupiter is the biggest planet, obviously, in the solar system. They used to think that it might have been a failed star, which is super interesting. It turns out it's probably not, but it's one of the, I mean, Saturn and Jupiter are both the gas giants. They have, Jupiter takes a year, or 12 years, to go around the sun.
Yeah.
It spends about a year in each sign. And Saturn is quite a bit farther out, but they have they have like a similarity in the sense that they're kind of like in ancient astrology, they were like the farthest out you could see. Saturn was the end, the limit, the final
frontier.
Grim Reaper. It was what we think, more like what we think of Pluto now.
Yes.
But it still has that sort of the stern daddy, and Jupiter is like the benevolent daddy, like the daddy who wants to give you all the gifts, and and they're all dads, aren't they? Like we only have the moon and Venus that are feminine in the solar system, except for of course the bad girl Eris, but all the other planets except for Mercury, which is sort of ambisexual, I suppose you'd say these days.
Neutral.
But yeah, like the big gas giants are like the father of the gods. Jupiter was the father of the gods in Roman mythology, like the analog to Zeus in Greek mythology, which is super interesting. And Saturn was Kronos, was the father time, the limitations and the slicing off of the wheat and the lifespan and So when you bring those two, the benevolent, expansive energy of Jupiter and the restricting time awareness of Saturn together, it's going to be interesting.
Yes.
One of the political cycles I used to watch, because around 2000 they had all these predictions that whoever was president in 2000 was going to have an assassination attempt on his life or possibly to die in office, because there was this, it was called the presidential death cycle. And if you Google that, you will find some fascinating history. It turns out that from 1900 through the 20th century, everyone who was elected on 1920, 1940, 1960, and 1980. 1980 was Reagan, and he had an assassination attempt on his life, and if it hadn't been for the medical advances of the day, he would have probably died. But all of the other presidents, not FDR. Yeah, FDR died in office. He was elected in 1940. JFK was elected in 1960. He died in office. So going back, like the names are like not on the tip of my tongue, but basically everyone who was elected on those in that 20-year Jupiter-Saturn cycle, when Jupiter and Saturn are conjunct, they had all either died in office, like due to assassination or illness or something like that. And the cycle was broken with George W. Bush, who of course was president in 2000 and did not die, but probably in the modern era, there was no president who was more closely guarded, maybe until Obama, because of all of the controversy and the wars and the beginning of what we now, is just the normal of American politics with the divisiveness between the political parties. And the security apparatus around the presidency had never wrapped up so so fast.
So this aspect is actually the transiting aspect of Jupiter square Saturn is going to be in place over this upcoming election as well. So there's
interesting.
Yeah, so there's going to be perhaps a little bit of tension there.
Yeah.
I would see Jupiter as like the planet that gives and Saturn the planet that takes. And they tend to be the opposites, don't they? You've got the benevolent uncle, and then you've got the be home on time.
Put on a sweater,
Yes, so there are two giving and taking type of planets, and they're coming together in a square.
In a square, yeah. Exactly. I mean, the conjunction is the one associated with the presidential quote-unquote death cycle.
Right.
But of course, the square is a harder aspect than a conjunction.
Yes.
And that also brings with it its own difficulties.
Yes.
And
we'll see which planet's going to prevail as this aspect unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what you want to look at. Like, if you have it in your chart, or if Jupiter, or I'm sure we have the exact aspect, the numbers. So Jupiter is going to be at, let's see. So it's the first exact, we're dealing with a bit of a retrograde. So the first exact is August 17th, 2024. The second is December 24th. And then the final is June 15th, 2025. So this is a triple hit. And the first square exact on August 17th is going to be, Jupiter will be in Gemini at 17 degrees.
Yes.
And Saturn will be in Pisces at 17 degrees.
Yes.
So that's interesting. December 24th, Jupiter will be at 14 degrees of Gemini, and that's when it's retrograde. And the Saturn will be at 14 Pisces.
Yes.
And then the final June 15th aspect, it'll be at 1 degrees of Cancer and 1 degrees of Aries.
Yeah, there's a shift there at the end.
Yeah, which is interesting. So it's going to go from the mutable signs to the cardinal signs.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I do think with this very first square that's unfolding in August, because Jupiter rules Pisces technically, so it's disposing Saturn. So in a way, I feel as though Jupiter almost has the drop on Saturn in this square.
Yeah.
But Jupiter is in Gemini in its detriment, so it's going to kill the struggle, but it still does dispose Saturn.
Yeah.
So this inclines me to want to say that during this square in August, Jupiter in Gemini is likely to be more prominent and the dominant planet within the square.
Well, that's good, because Jupiter's the one we want to root for.
Well, it is. Go Jupiter.
Team Jupiter, yeah.
Team Jupiter, yes.
Yeah.
And then in the December one, we've got the exact same thing, but now Jupiter's retrograde as well. So, but still, it's still disposing Saturn.
And in the first one, Saturn is retrograde. I don't know if we had that originally. So,
yes. Yeah. And then when we get to the one June 2025, which suddenly there's a shift because they're in different signs now. And during this time when Jupiter's in Cancer, it's in its exaltation, so it's still pretty strong there.
Yeah.
And Saturn in Aries is in its fall. So again, it's slightly, I don't want to say the underdog, but it does seem to give a vibe that during this particular Jupiter square Saturn, that Jupiter's going to be top dog. Yeah. Jupiter on top.
That is super interesting.
Yeah.
But then again, obviously it is a square, so it's a conflict. They're not going to, it's not an easy energy either way, whichever one wins, so to speak. And if you have this in your natal chart, it's obviously, most likely going to be in different signs.
Yes.
But there are a lot of interesting descriptions that we can get into from the books that have to do with, it's not a happy alignment to necessarily have these two planets in square, because they are such powerful energies.
Yes.
And when we talk about powerful, like we tend to think of the transpersonal planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto as kind of the most powerful planets to have aspecting like your personal planets. But if you think about it, Jupiter and Saturn, I mean, that makes up just the sheer mass of the solar system that is taken up by those two planets is, I don't have the statistic of it, but it's a lot. It's like the majority of the solar system is those planets. Yeah, mass-wise.
Yeah.
So it's powerful. There's a lot of energy there, and when they're square, it's not it's not friendly.
No. So it's challenging. It's a challenging aspect.
Yeah.
Squares are.
Yeah. So
that's in general. Well, we talk about it a bit more, but that is the transit that's unfolding. But if you have this square Jupiter square Saturn in your natal chart, you need to say, well, which sign is Jupiter in, which sign is Saturn in, which is likely to be the more dominant of the square, because not all squares are created equal.
Right.
And we do have someone in our close circle who does have a Jupiter square Saturn.
Yeah, interestingly, my partner has that, and I didn't even, sometimes when we do these, when we do an aspect episode, I'll look and see who I know. I didn't actually do that this time, but what I did do is I looked through a couple of my aspect books, and one of the things I kind of tend to do when I get a new book is I'll scribble in the margins or like next to, individual aspects that are interesting. Like, if I have it, it's like a little AO, like my initials but I noticed in the Jupiter square Saturn section, my partner's initials are there. So that is interesting.
So do we know what signs his Jupiter and Saturns are in?
Yeah, he has Jupiter in Aquarius and, Jupiter in Taurus and Saturn in Aquarius.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So from what we were just saying then, it's quite clear that
that Saturn is the winner.
Saturn is, it's in rulership, so yes.
Yeah, and that indicates someone who has a great deal of responsibility and is a very devoted and
does his duty.
Does his duty. Yeah. I mean, Jupiter in Taurus is great because it gives this sort of love of the finer things and appreciation of the finer things in life, and you have someone who can remember brands, and this is something that I have a very hard time with.
Right.
Someone will ask me where'd you get that purse, or I'm like, I don't know, I got it at a thrift store, I don't know what brand it is. I get used books, whatever, but he's like, just get yourself a good phone, get yourself a good purse. He's always saying that, and
that's Taurus.
that is a Jupiter and Taurus thing. It's like, just spend the money and get yourself a good whatever, and then you won't have
you're worth it.
You're worth it. You won't have to get another one every year,
Yes.
If you could just spend the money and get a good one, and that's how I got my famous roller skates, is because I took him with me, and thank God I did, because I might have gotten the
cheap and nasties,
the crappy pair, and I would have just put them in the closet because they were uncomfortable and hard and stiff and not great. Instead, he was like, "Why don't you try on the pair you really want?" And so I was like, "Oh, you mean the beautiful suede ones that I can't afford?" And he's like, "You can afford it." And sure enough, it's my new obsession. That was 6 years ago.
Wow.
But yeah, if you're not sure if you want something, but you're open to suggestion, bring someone with Jupiter in Taurus, or pretty much anything in Taurus.
And how do you see this Saturn in Aquarius playing out? Because it's clearly quite, I wouldn't say restrictive, but do by the rules. If you're going to be in at 10, be in at 10.
Yeah, I mean, he has owned his own business in the past. He's now working in the hospitality industry and working very, very hard and learning all sorts of new things.
Yes.
And anything that he puts his mind to, he will figure it out. He's also a musician, so I've seen him to me, I'm not a musician, so anyone who knows music or can figure music out, it's like magic. It's like watching The Matrix, and he's like, I know Kung Fu all of a sudden, because you just plugged in the brain thing. And I'll be like, oh, I like this song, and he's like, he looks up the chords on his little magical app, and all of a sudden he's playing it 6 minutes later.
Right.
So I mean, that's talent, but you don't get to be talented at music unless you practice it.
You've got to put in the hours, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably what the Saturn will do when it's well placed. You will put in the hours
and
to
he does.
hone your craft.
Every single day he picks up a guitar and plays just a little bit every single day. And I mean, it hasn't always been that way, but he wants to be good at that. And that's what it takes.
I mean, I absolutely know nothing about music, and so we've got this kind of introductory little jingle that goes at the beginning of the podcast episode, and someone was saying to me, last month, "Oh, I like that guitar." I said, "What guitar? Is it the guitar?" I thought it was a piano. And no, I'm listening and think, it probably is a guitar. I don't know.
It's hilarious. I can't tell either. It's so funny.
It's just this da-da-da-ding. I think, I have no clue. So interesting, yeah.
It's like that with food too, I don't know ingredients half the time unless I'm looking at it. And famously, when we went to the blind dining restaurant, and you have you order ahead of time, but you get a surprise appetizer.
Right.
And I mean, you can order a surprise appetizer, and then you have to guess what it is, and it's kind of fun. And I could not guess it. Because you can't see the visual cue is,
It's not there, right?
Yeah, and people are like, well, I think I would know if I was eating this or that. And I'm like, you think so, but...
I wouldn't. I struggle to tell red from white if I'm blindfolded, but...
For sure.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a few quotes from around the blogosphere and a couple of books, and we'll tell you the names of the books, obviously. But Jupiter and square Saturn in the natal chart. So this is something that if you have this in your chart, this is what it can feel like or look like. It can feel like you're driving with the handbrake on. And this is something that they say also with like Saturn square Neptune, but Jupiter square Saturn is definitely one of those. It's one of those where there's the force that wants to go forward and it wants to expand, and then there's the force that wants to restrict you and hold you back. And especially when you're younger, because it's one of those aspects that you really grow into and you have to kind of master it, and you can. It's not one of those squares where it's just always going to be troublesome.
Yes.
I think it's one of those where you can really come into your own in the future, in your in your maturity, and you can really figure out what needs to be worked on and what can be let go, what can be joyous and buoyant in your life, and what needs to take a bunch of effort, because you kind of have to pick your battles, I think, with this aspect.
That's a good one. Like, you've got to decide when are you going to expend the energy to go and fight that battle.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's going to come easy to you, and what is just going to be something that you are going to have to work at all your life. And then get good at working at it, because this will give you the drive to do that. Depending on, obviously, you want to look at where Saturn and Jupiter are, but if you have, especially if Saturn is stronger, I would think that you can learn to love that hard work. And maybe in your youth, you're like, why is this coming easier? Why is this so hard? Like, why can't, I want to do this, but yet it's so, maybe the thing that's harder is the thing that you're better at or whatever. And you just, you end up choosing,
Right.
But these things are important because you can learn to love the struggle and then love the feeling of mastery. And it's just like exercise or getting good at a sport or getting good at a certain type of game or anything that takes a ton of practice, music, obviously. And once you realize that the more effort you put into something, the rewards come back to you. And then, then it becomes addictive, it becomes a cycle, and it becomes something that you can become really good at. So.
I recently think of Saturn as this 10,000 hour business.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Because Saturn does rule time, and you've got to put 10,000 hours in to be a great guitarist or a great astrologer or whatever it is. Yeah. And really, if you're interested in these things, you will.
Yeah.
So you don't think, I've got to start with 10,000 hours in baking cakes, because you ain't going to do it. If you're not doing it by now, you're not going to be doing it. That's what I think. You already by now, you've got these things laid out, I think.
Totally. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's really interesting. Yeah. And I mean, the personalities of the people who are famous who have this aspect.
Yes.
It's really interesting because it's funny noticing that my partner and some of the people who I really find myself attracted to, their stories and their narrative or their talents or whatever. And it's just funny that some of the people who I admire.
So who do we have in mind?
So we have Angelina Jolie.
Okay.
Who I've always had a soft spot for Angelina.
Really?
I just have.
Yeah.
Nikola Tesla, who, I mean...
Oh, we love him.
Geez, who doesn't? Awesome. Russell Brand, and he's a, bit of a controversial figure. I began to have a big crush on him when he was a comedian, and he was just sort of this irreverent, Puck-like sort of figure with his long rock star hair and his leather jeans and blah, blah, blah. And he went through a weird phase, and he's now found Christianity, and that's interesting. But I still find him fascinating. He's got a sparkling wit. He's a Gemini, and he's got this intense, intellectual, fast-talking thing that I love, and I can't help but find that attractive. Okay, so Lady Gaga, hardworking and amazing and just really cool and interesting and bizarre. And we have Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you've watched The Crown or if you are an Anglophile or...
Well, everybody knows who she is, right?
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, some people might not appreciate...
She did her duty.
Yeah. 100%. And if you've watched The Crown, which I did, and I could not have given a damn about the royal family before that, but it makes you empathize. Yes. It really does. And even there's so many conflicts, and you go, is it, are you team Charles or are you team the Queen? Because there's definitely conflicts, and I'm not team Diana for sure. No offense to her. I feel sorry for her, but wow. It's just interesting. Like you really see that there's this human side to these sort of weird cardboard cutout figures that
Yeah.
What,
You don't know. So that you see, because this is a square, this is bringing up the side.
Yeah.
Pick your side. You're with me or you're against me.
Oh my God, exactly.
And that's what Bush said, right? And so are you Team Jupiter or are you Team Saturn? And depending on your own natal chart, whichever planet is stronger for you, you're going to say, Team Jupiter, Team Saturn.
Interesting.
So I don't know where you stand on that.
That is fascinating. Yeah, that's true. A couple more people which are very divisive. Sigmund Freud.
Oh.
And Mel Gibson, which is... right? Yeah. I mean, no one is just wishy-washy on Sigmund Freud or,
The Passion. He did The Passion, and that was the end of his acting career.
Right.
But,
there were some others.
Stand up for what you believe in. Yeah.
I don't even want to necessarily say this one because I think most thinking people are probably not on his team anymore. But Woody Allen is also, so gross. But anyway,
Okay.
It's a divisive and sometimes, I mean, even the people who we don't like on this list, they've made their mark.
Yes.
Marie Curie also is on this list.
Okay.
So it's a struggle.
It clearly is. It's not an easygoing aspect. It's a square between two heavy-hitting planets.
Yeah. Oh, Anthony Bourdain. I'm going to stop with the list now, but I mean, these.
You love him, right?
I mean, who doesn't? And I'm not a foodie, but he's probably the only chef I ever read a book by.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We'll do one on chefs at some point. It's actually quite interesting. I
mean, I'm watching The Bear season 3. It's like, it's as close to being a foodie as I get is watching
The Bear.
BEAR. Yeah, it's this amazing show. It's about a chef, and he is. If you're watching it, you're watching it. It's amazing.
Okay.
It's really brilliantly done. It's very difficult to watch for people who don't like to watch people yell at each other.
Okay.
My best friend is like, I tried to watch it and I know it's good, but I can't.
Yeah, no, that's
like, I just can't do that.
It wears me down.
Yeah. And it's funny, I've realized like how many of my friends are just like deeply broken because they find like that show is like so, like I had one friend tell me that she can't get through an episode without crying, and I'm like, I'm like, oh my God, your family must have been horrible. Like, wow,
This is why these shows are so good. I had that with Grey's Anatomy. I got to a point and I thought, if I watch another episode, there's going to be more tears. And I thought, no, I'm not going there. But it was still a good show.
Oh, I had that with This Is Us. I got to the point where I was just like, do I want to be sobbing? Like, do I want my eyes to be puffy for days? No, I can't.
No, interesting.
Yeah. So if you have this in your natal chart, if you have Jupiter square Saturn, and regardless of what signs they're in, because of course one of them will be stronger, and that's really something important to look at. But regardless, if they're in square to each other, this is an aspect that has to do with improving yourself gradually through hard work. And I'm going to quote here from a couple of books. One of them is, I've quoted a lot of times from this, Aspects and Personality by Karen Haymaker Zondag. And she says, whenever we feel like setting to work enthusiastically, improving our chances and seizing fresh opportunities, which is Jupiter buzzwords, we're aware of the dead hand of Saturn. Whoa. Fearing to make a move, we delay too long, or else by error of judgment, we saddle ourselves with a pile of unwanted work. Whatever the case may be, our theory and practice, vision, and reality are out of alignment, and so we are uncertain how to proceed. This can lead to extreme modes of expression. We can become beset by setbacks. We're subject to disappointments. Somber melancholy can overtake our personality, and we should be aiming for effort. But sometimes, when all is said and done, it says these aspects offer great opportunities, and for a well-defined field of action, we might do well by taking on responsibilities under a sort of supervision that allows us an amount of freedom so we can produce hard work and develop our confidence through seeing the fruits of those labors.
Wow.
And that's kind of what I was saying before about just picking your battles and choosing what to put that effort forth, because everything is going to be a struggle, but you're going to find that is rewarded if you put in those hours.
Yeah. I think it's not an easy aspect to grapple with.
It sounds really
and it really does come down to which planet will technically be stronger, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked a bit more about what's like when Saturn is stronger, I think. But I think if Jupiter is the stronger, it might be a little bit less difficult, I would think. And then it might be a thing where you put forth a lot of effort and you're not sure if it's going to work or not. And then maybe fortune just kind of tips towards, towards winning more often, maybe.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm guessing.
Okay.
I mean, probably the examples we've given, the celebrity examples, maybe the people whose lives are incredibly difficult, your Nikola Tesla's, dying in poverty and shame, and then only like 100 years later being sort of exhumed from history and becoming like the most famous, and his battle with Edison, and now we think of Edison as the elephant killer and the horrible, but for like the first 100 years when Nikola Tesla was alive, he was the one who was shunned and living with his pigeons in a hotel until he,
and there's one group of the population who just think a Tesla's a car. They don't know the backstory on that. So
if you don't know, go look.
You don't know.
He's a fascinating, amazing person. Yeah, but persistence, patience. Optimism coupled with hard work. Cautious optimism is another keyword. And
cautious optimism. There you go.
Here's some keywords from Sue Tompkins. She wrote a wonderful book called Aspects in Astrology.
Yes.
And this is to do with any aspects between Jupiter and Saturn, but particularly with the square. Tests of faith, the definition of wealth, philosophy of materialism, fear of abundance, and the large superego. So the superego being that Freudian concept of the internalized father, the thing that says, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that? What will society say? What will the neighbors think?" And so that internal conflict between the internalized superego and what the ego wants, the expansion versus that internalized voice that tells
contraction,
you, "Don't do it. You don't want to risk it."
Yeah, it really is a challenge, and because it's a square, let's just say this here, that when it's a square, it's an internal dilemma within yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas the opposition is the external. You've got people challenging.
Right, you'll project that challenge onto others with the aspect.
So you probably, if you do have this aspect, you are grappling with, should I should I stop or should I go? Da 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 da. Whatever that song is.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting aspect, and it's interesting that it's coming up towards the end of this year, as we've said, it will be influential over the whole world during this period, And
we are coming up to an interesting political season.
We surely are.
So, who knows? This may have some resonances in the political climate.
Well, yes.
In the end of this year. Yeah.
So another thing to pay attention to with this particular square is that these are both, Jupiter and Saturn are both in mutable signs.
Yeah, and that might not that might not necessarily always be the case. Obviously, they're going to move into cardinal next year.
Yes.
So, mutable is good. I like mutable placements. I have a lot of that in my chart, being a Virgo.
Yeah. It does bring flexibility and the ability to flip-flop about and change your mind, which may occur for these first two exact squares, but that third one is likely to, I want to say, cement it in those cardinal signs there. Yeah. Because what's going to happen is, before this third square happens, is Jupiter's going to change signs. Big news, it's going into Cancer.
Yeah.
And Saturn is changing signs from Pisces to Aries. Bigger news, because it's crossing the beginning of the zodiac, starting a whole new cycle.
The Aries point. Yeah.
The Aries point. And so prior to this final square, there's going to be this shift of energy where they're going to say, okay.
Yeah. Right before it. And we're obviously going to have, episodes about those next year.
No doubt. We'll be doing Jupiter into Cancer and Saturn into Aries. And this does then put Jupiter on top. Well, it is all the way, but it's definitely on top at the end. So it's interesting, because not always with these squares would you have that. If you had, say, Saturn in Capricorn or Aquarius, where it is strong, it would be on top, such as your partner's chart, which is... So you need to bear that in mind as well if you do have this natally.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's going to be mutable, and then cardinal. Yeah. So there might be a little wishy-washy back and forth. Oh, we'll do it this way. It doesn't really matter, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But then, whatever, here's the thing, whatever unfolds on August the 17th, whatever the situation is, or the person you meet, or the conflict you approach, the resolution will not actually come until the June next year. Yeah. So
with perhaps a critical point happening around December 24th.
Yes. So here's an example. So say you meet Mr. Right or Mr. Maybe Right on August 17th. You go and date. You're dating. December 24th is going to bring some things to light. Yeah. And then whether you decide to go on or not will occur on June 15th. So the opening and the closing of this cycle of this square, if something begins on August 17th for you in your life, it's going to have the flavour of this.
A job, a project,
a project, Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, if there's such a thing. Yeah. And but the culmination of it will come here. Yeah. So this will either be the time when we'll make the commitment or we're done. I've had enough of him. And you're moving on. So it's like, what is it, an 8-month period from June to August? Well, 10-month period where this is going to kind of be in place. But that's always the thing, that on that first transit, what's happening that week of August 17th, pay attention.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I'm thinking of our lives as well. Pay attention, and something, then you have the final say will occur in the June. So that's kind of interesting too. Yeah. Or should I say it's rather curious. Yeah. Yes.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Okay, so we've been chatting about the Jupiter square Saturn. We're talking about it because it's coming up towards the end of 2024. And of course, we've spoken about it natally as well. So if you found value in this episode, do consider sharing it with anybody who'd be interested. Yeah. You can send us a text about your questions if you go to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but not the YouTube. You can then click straight through and send us a direct text with your questions for our next Q&A. And we'd love to answer your questions, and please do put your name there. Otherwise, we don't know what it is. So that would be great.
A fake name, whatever,
Yeah, or whatever it is. But I'm just getting things. What about full moon? And I think, I can't go with that. So, a bit more context, please, folks. That would really help us. Yeah. And so you can email us at starzology@gmail.com. And certainly do get on our newsletter list if you're not already. That's at starzology.com/newsletter. And you can catch Arwynne's latest episode. She talks about movies and books and current affairs and what have you.
Yep. Follow my blog. Just go to mspink.net, MSPINK.net.
Yeah, and so we've got some interesting things coming up towards the end of this year. We'll talk a bit more about them later.
Definitely.
And Arwynne's got a lot to say about I don't want to say current affairs, but what's going on?
I mean, I talk about what's going on. I talk about my childhood, I talk about nostalgia, I talk about books.
It's movies. A magazine program, I would say. It's great. So that's misspink.net, and you can follow along with what Arwynne's up to, and you can certainly contact her there too. So this has been great. It's been interesting, and we don't always get together to do aspects because they're coming and going all the time, but this is a big one. It's not going to be around for another 6 years, so we'll talk about it now. And so that's the Jupiter square Saturn. So, Arwynne, thank you so much for joining me once more again today. It's been lovely having you.
It's been lovely. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, folks, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. and I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.